Promise me that you'll forgive me after knowing the truth about your father's death, she pleaded. My father's death? He muttered. My father died of a heart attack. Wasn't that what the doctor said? No, my son. The truth is, it was Grace's graduation day. Grace panicked as she tried calling Ebuka on the phone, but as both lines were switched off. The love of her life, who was to celebrate with her on her big day, was not in sight. When she scanned through the crowd like an eagle, there he was, standing under a mango tree at the school garden, dressed sharply in a navy blue suit, holding a bouquet of white roses. Oh my God, Grace muttered as she quickly ran towards his direction. Just as she approached, he stepped forward, his heart pounding. With trembling hands, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Before Grace could process what was happening, Ebuka dropped to one knee, the diamond ring catching the sunlight and casting tiny rainbows. Gasps and cheers erupted from the crowd, drawing everyone's attention. Grace, he began, his voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm him. You've made me the happiest man in the world. You've shown me what it means to truly live and to truly love. Will you marry me? Grace froze. Her mouth opened as her hands flew to her cheeks. The world seemed to stop as she stared at the man before her, the man she loved more than anything. Her heart raced with a whirlwind of emotions. A crowd of onlookers stood, cheering and shouting, "Say yes! Say yes!" Finally, she stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached for his. "Yes!" she exclaimed, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you!" The crowd erupted in applause as Ebuka slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a tight embrace. Tears streamed down Grace's face as she clung to him, her heart soaring. In that moment, she felt like the luckiest woman alive, but she did not know the challenges that was waiting for her would test their love in ways she could never have imagined. Ebuka met Grace during his university days. She was everything he wasn't, free-spirited, warm, and full of life. Her caramel complexion seemed to glow under the sun, and her braids framed her delicate face. Grace's laughter was infectious, a melody that could lighten the heaviest of hearts. They met in the library on a rainy afternoon. Ebuka, engrossed in his finance textbook, had not noticed Grace until she accidentally dropped her stack of books beside him. "Sorry!" she said, her voice soft yet vibrant. Ebuka looked up and found himself staring into her large, expressive eyes. He blinked and was speechless. It's fine," he stammered, bending down to help her pick up the books. From that day, they became inseparable. Study sessions turned into long walks around campus, sharing ice cream cones and whispering dreams about the future. Grace brought out a side of Ebuka he didn't know existed, a playful, carefree version of himself that thrived in her presence. Yet even as their love blossomed, Ebuka kept their relationship hidden from his mother. He dreaded her reaction, knowing that she disapproves of anything she could not control. Ebuka's mother, Madame Teresa, is a widow who single-handedly raised her son. She is a woman of high timber and caliber. Her possessive control over her son was strong, even down to his relationship, and how he runs the business her late husband left for her to manage, which she handed over to the son. However, she harbored a very dark secret that would shake Ebuka's life. "She's protective," Ebuka told Grace one evening, as they strolled hand in hand under the moonlit sky. The light breeze ruffled Grace's dress, and she tilted her head to look at him. She was concerned about Ebuka's mom. "Is she protective or controlling?" Grace asked, her voice gentle but probing. Ebuka sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. "Both, I suppose, but I'll tell her about us when the time is right. Just trust me." Grace nodded, though doubt lingered in her mind. She loved Ebuka deeply, but couldn't shake the feeling that his mother was a big threat to their relationship. "Are you a mommy's boy?" she asked jokingly. "Of course I am," he responded as they both laughed together. The relationship blossomed even after Ebuka graduated and left for service. They kept communicating over the phone, and occasionally Ebuka found time to pay Grace visits. Grace had always been an ambitious woman. When Ebuka proposed, she had gently asked him to give her time to complete her youth service and at least get a good job before becoming his wife. Ebuka, shocked by her determination and intelligence, had agreed without hesitation. 2 years later, they tied the knot in a simple but elegant wedding. Grace, by then, had secured a position as a customer care representative at one of the nation's top commercial banks, earning a very good salary. Her hard work and dedication stood out, and she quickly made a name for herself in her field. But banking was no walk in the park. Grace's days began very early, leaving the house by 6:30 a.m. and often returning home well past 7 p.m. The demands of her job were immense, but she poured her heart into it. Unfortunately, balancing her career with her duties as a wife proved to be an uphill battle. Madame Teresa, ever the domineering presence in the household, made life increasingly difficult for Grace. Despite living under the same roof, she refused to lend a helping hand. Instead, she criticized Grace incessantly. "Why are you serving leftover food?" she snapped at Grace one night, pushing the plate away as Grace placed it before her. "I can't eat food that has slept overnight. Must I remind you I need fresh meals every day?" Grace, exhausted from a long day at work, fought back tears as she nodded silently. Despite her best efforts to please her mother-in-law, nothing she did seemed good enough. The chores were endless. Cooking, cleaning, and laundry all fell squarely on Grace's shoulders. To keep up, she began waking up at 4 a.m., sacrificing her rest to meet the household's demands. Her body soon began to show signs of wear. Fatigue gripped her daily, and frequent illnesses became her unwelcome companions. One evening, Grace mustered the courage to speak with Ebuka about getting a maid to ease her burden. "Ebuka," she began cautiously, her voice soft but firm, "I need help around the house. I can't keep up with everything and still perform well at work. Let's hire someone, even if it's just for the cleaning." Ebuka hesitated. "I'll think about it," he replied, his tone angry. Unknowingly to them, Madame Teresa overheard their conversation, and immediately she stormed into the room, her face livid. "No woman will cook for my son but his wife," she declared. "It is your responsibility as a wife to ensure he has fresh meals 3 times a day. If you can't handle that, maybe you should choose between your job and your marriage." Grace's heart sank. She turned to Ebuka for support, but he remained silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. The next morning, Grace woke up late. Her body had finally succumbed to all the stress. She had little time left to get to the office and no time to prepare a fresh meal, so she hurriedly defrosted some food from the freezer and microwaved it, served on the table, and she quickly dressed up and dashed out of the house for work. It was a small act of practicality, but one that would set off a chain of events she could never have anticipated. When she returned home that evening, Madame Teresa was waiting in the living room, her arms crossed and her expression cold. "Grace," she began sharply, "this is the last straw. You have disrespected me and this family enough. My son deserves better." "You dare to serve us leftovers? Is this the kind of wife you are?" she fumed, banging her fists on the dining table. Ebuka, sitting beside his mother, finally spoke up. "Grace, I can't watch you disrespect my mother and go against her orders. She's right. You need to choose between your job and this family. Not like I can't provide for you. How much is your salary anyway? I'll pay you double to stay home and focus on being a proper wife." Tears welled up in Grace's eyes as she stared at her husband, unable to recognize the man she had once loved so deeply. "But Ebuka," she began speaking, "you've always known I love my job. If you knew your deep intentions was to turn me into a full-time housewife, you should have told me earlier. This was not what I bargained for at all," she said, sobbing. Madame Teresa, sensing the tension, seized the moment. "Well, if you can't decide, pack your things and leave if you can't be a proper wife," she barked. "Well, I'll make it easier for you," she said, standing up abruptly. She marched to her son's room, grabbed her suitcase, and began throwing her belongings out of the room. "You can leave tonight," she declared, dragging the bags into the living room. Grace stood frozen, her mind racing, and she could not believe what was happening. Memories of all the good time Ebuka and her shared while in school clouded her mind. On the other hand, memories of her wedding day flashed before her, how she had let Madame Teresa dictate every detail, from the color of the attires to the guest list. She had dismissed it then, thinking that she was helping take some stress off her shoulders. But now the truth was undeniable. She had married a man still tethered to his mother's control, a mummy's boy. "Grace, choose wisely. Don't leave because we won't beg you," Ebuka said, his voice lacking any emotion. Her heart shattered as she realized there was nothing left to fight for. With tears streaming down her face, she grabbed her bags and walked out of the house. She dialed her driver, who arrived within minutes. Without looking back, she loaded her belongings into the trunk and got into the car. As the vehicle pulled away, Grace gazed out of the window, her tears blurring her eyes from seeing the city lights. The marriage that had once filled her with hope and promise had ended in heartbreak after only a year. One whole year of pain and emotional torture. A few months after Grace left, Ebuka moved on, seemingly unfazed by the collapse of his first marriage. Encouraged by Madame Teresa, who assured him he deserved better, he decided to marry a woman who would fit the mold of the ideal wife his mother envisioned, family-oriented and willing to sacrifice her career for domestic duties. If only Ebuka truly knew who his mother really is. A few months later, Madame Teresa couldn't help but notice a beautiful young girl named Amara in the neighborhood. Amara's ebony beauty sparkled, complementing her flawless skin. She spoke calmly, was well-mannered, and everyone in the neighborhood liked her. Amara had a small shop around the street. Madame Teresa patronized her often and loved the way Amara attended to her whenever she came by. One day, Madame Teresa visited her shop as usual and requested a bottle of spices. Amara didn't have the brand she requested, but, with charm and intelligence, presented another brand. "Ma, I don't have the one you asked for, but this one is really good. This is what I currently use at home, and I'm enjoying it. Just buy a small jar and try it. A trial will convince you, and you'll come back for more," she said with a smile. Madame Teresa smiled as she collected the bottle from Amara. "You're so beautiful and soft-spoken. Would you please marry my son and make me the happiest woman in the world?" she asked. "My son is a very handsome and successful young man. You'd love him at first sight," she added, smiling. Amara chuckled. "You're so funny, Mama. Well, I'd like to meet your son, at least to know who I'm supposed to be falling in love with," she teased. Madame Teresa invited Amara over for dinner one evening, and there, the relationship between Ebuka and Amara began. Amara started performing wifely duties even before they were married. She would cook delicious meals, package them in flasks, and take them to Ebuka and Mama, as she fondly called Madame Teresa. "My son, I told you you would find someone better soon. Can you see what I was talking about? Your wife is here. Please, let's fix a date to visit her people and make her ours already," Madame Teresa said excitedly. She had finally found a choice wife for her son, someone who would do her bidding effortlessly. If only she knew that this would be the end of her terror. The introduction, traditional marriage, and church wedding were all done, and Amara was brought into the home with so much joy. Madame Teresa was even happier than her son, who married the wife. The first 3 months were peaceful as Amara tried her best to follow all of Mama's instructions and stay in her good books. She ensured the house was spotless, prepared fresh meals daily, and encouraged Ebuka and Mama to join her in attending church every Sunday. Whenever she wanted to discuss something with her husband, she would go through Mama and let her make the decisions. But soon enough, Amara's kind and sweet nature toward her mother-in-law began to change bit by bit. She started oversleeping into late mornings, faking weakness. At first, Madame Teresa thought it was a sign that her grandchild was on the way. Please rest, my dear, and allow my grandchild to form well," she would say whenever Amara complained of tiredness. Amara would smile broadly and reply, "Thank you, Mama." But Amara no longer cooked or cleaned as before, leaving all the work for Madame Teresa. Eventually, Madame Teresa grew tired and began complaining bitterly, revealing her true attitude to Amara. "Amara, what is wrong with you?" she asked one day. "Are you the first pregnant woman on earth? That is, if there's even a pregnancy at all. Get up from that bed and start cleaning the house. See how untidy everywhere is." "Mama, I feel very weak. I haven't been able to sleep well. My waist hurts a lot." "Oh, it's the pregnancy," Madame Teresa replied calmly. "That's how it affects most women. It's not easy at all. Sorry, please rest well. Let me go and clean the kitchen." One day, while Ebuka was away on a business trip, Madame Teresa woke up to loud music blaring from the sitting room. She walked toward the sound and saw Amara dancing vigorously. "Amara, stop dancing like that. You'll hurt the baby," she cautioned. "Which baby?" Amara retorted, laughing mockingly. "The one in your stomach," Madame Teresa replied. Ha 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 ha. Amara burst into loud, ridiculing laughter. Who would get pregnant for your impotent son? What? My son is impotent? Yes, Mama. Or should I say, Madame Teresa. He's not only impotent between his legs, but also impotent in his heart. A man who cannot make decisions on his own. Is that one not impotent? Madame Teresa was speechless, her mouth opened wide as Amara continued revealing shocking truths about her son. Wait, Amara, what happened to you? Madame Teresa asked, lowering her voice, as if to calm Amara into divulging her secrets. What happened to me? Mama, the question should be, what happened to you? Why did you treat the women before me so poorly? What women? Who are you, Amara? Well, I'm a good Samaritan on a mission to teach you an unforgettable lesson, Amara declared, her voice cold and sharp. Teach me a lesson? How? You must be out of your mind, Madame Teresa fired back. No, Mama, you're out of your mind, because no woman in her right senses would poison her husband's food and watch him die before her very eyes. Madame Teresa staggered, her hand covering her mouth in shock. How? How did you know? Amara smirked. You remember Neka, the little girl who lived with you as a maid 15 years ago? She's my cousin. She saw you put that substance in your husband's food, but didn't understand what it was. When he started vomiting and screaming, "My stomach! My stomach!" and you told him to rest in peace, she understood it was poison. Madame Teresa dropped to her knees, trembling. Please, Amara, don't tell my son. I beg you, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. It will break him if he hears this. Don't beg me, Amara retorted. If you don't want him to be broken, then you'll have to do what I say from now on. Understood? Yes, yes, Madame Teresa replied, trembling. Now go and wash the dishes in the kitchen and prepare me a delicious pepper soup fish, Amara commanded. Run along, she shouted as Madame Teresa hurriedly left for the kitchen. This torment continued for weeks, even after Ebuka returned from his trip. He couldn't help but notice his mother's uneasiness around Amara and how all the chores in the house were left for her to do. Mama, you should be tired from cooking. Please leave the dishes for Amara to do, Ebuka said one evening. Amara quickly rushed in and asked, Mama, are you tired? Her eyes gave a clear, threatening order. No, not at all, Madame Teresa replied. Apart from leaving all the chores for Madame Teresa, Amara began making demands on Ebuka to expand her business and support her family's building project. She blackmailed Madame Teresa to encourage Ebuka to give Amara all the money she requested. Ebuka was shocked by the situation. His mother was no longer the Iron Lady he once knew. Something must be wrong somewhere, he thought to himself. One morning, as Amara left for her shop, Ebuka stayed behind to have a conversation with his mother. Mummy, what's the matter with you? You've become a shadow of yourself these past few months. What's happening? He asked, his eyes filled with great concern. Nothing, my son, she managed to mutter. Mum, please tell me the truth this minute. Whatever it is, I can help you. What he was about to hear would scar him forever. The truth is, she started sobbing. I'm scared to tell you this because it will break you. I've lived with this secret for over 15 years now, and honestly, the guilt has weighed me down so badly. Even Amara got to know about it, and she's blackmailing me with the information. What? Amara? Ebuka's voice was tense. Mummy, you're getting me worried. Please tell me everything. Whatever it is, I'm ready to take it in. Promise me that you'll forgive me after knowing the truth about your father's death, she pleaded. My father's death? He muttered. My father died of a heart attack. Wasn't that what the doctor said? No, my son. The truth is, she broke down in tears again, kneeling and holding Ebuka's trousers. The truth is what? Mummy? I poisoned him, she exclaimed. What? Mummy, how could you? Ebuka blurted. His countenance changed immediately as he pulled his trousers away from her grasp. I'm sorry, my son. I was blinded by jealousy and pain. Your father wanted to take another wife after all the struggles we went through to build this empire. I gave him my all. I sacrificed my career and my youth for him, yet he was bent on bringing in another woman to bear him more children. Were you and I not enough for him? What did he need other children and a wife for? He was cheating on me all the while, but I turned a blind eye. But him planning to bring in another woman to reap where she did not sow was intolerable. I couldn't stand losing everything I worked so hard to build. I tried convincing him against it, but he was bent on making it happen. But Mummy, why didn't you bear him more children? Ebuka asked, confused. I lost my womb after I had you. I went through hell while trying to birth you, and my womb had to be removed to save my life. That was why I couldn't have more children, she confessed. Ibuka's eyes softened, but his heart was filled with unexplained pain. The mother he had always seen as a good woman had a dark past that would haunt them forever. But why did you treat my wives the way you did? He asked, calmer now. I was trying to protect you from them. I was scared that would kill you the way I killed your father. She explained, sobbing. Ebuka was speechless. He was so shocked to learn that his mother was responsible for his father's untimely death. He cried all through that day until Amara returned from the shop. As Amara came into a cold house, and when she tried saying hello, no one responded. She walked into the kitchen and saw that things were just the way she had left them, and dinner had not been made. She rushed to where Madame Teresa was and lashed out angrily at her. Mama, dinner is not made yet. Why? Who is your house girl in this house? Ebuka yelled at her, as if to unleash his pent-up pains on her. You think I don't know about the blackmails you have caused my mother? What on earth did she do to you to deserve this? She was good to you, and she even made me marry you. Why treat her with so much disdain? Ebuka burst out. Amara's eyes widened as she realized she had been busted. She replied, Well, you mother showed so much wickedness to the other women. I'm here on a mission to pay her back the evil she deserves. Since I've been busted, there's nothing to hide anymore. I'd pack my bags and leave tonight as I'm already irritated. My mission is complete, and I'm sure she's learned her lesson already. As for you, Ebuka, I'm sorry that you're a victim of circumstance. I never loved you. I agreed to marry you solely to teach Madame Teresa an unforgettable lesson. She continued, However, I'll leave you with this advice. Man up and start taking responsibility for your actions. Stop being a mommy's boy. Your mother destroyed your life, and you sat there and watched her. Amara quickly packed her things and left the house. A satisfied look spread across her face as she let out a mocking laugh. Mission accomplished, she muttered to herself as she let out a deep gasp, packed her belongings into her car, and drove out of the compound. The revelation of Madame Teresa's dark secret hit Ebuka like a bolt of lightning. His world crumbled into pieces as he replayed her confession over and over in his mind. The woman he had loved, trusted, and called mother had killed his father, the man whose absence had shaped his entire life. How could she, of all people, commit such an unforgivable act? How could she live with herself, pretending to be the grieving widow all those years? For the first time in his life, Ebuka saw his mother not as a protector, but as a stranger. Someone capable of the unthinkable. The weight of the truth broke him. He couldn't sleep all night. He was filled with anguish. He sat alone in his study, staring blankly at the walls, consumed by thoughts of betrayal. She took my father from me, he whispered to himself one night, fists clenched in frustration. She robbed me of the love, guidance, and discipline I needed. She destroyed everything. The rage was unbearable, but beneath the anger lay a deep wound. The morning after her confession, Madame Teresa approached Ebuka. Her eyes were swollen and red from crying all night. She looked frail, her shoulders hunched as if carrying the weight of the sins she had hidden for so long. Ebuka, she began, her voice trembling, I have decided to move back to the village. I won't bother you anymore. I can't undo the past, but I will live out the rest of my days in penance, far away from here. Ebuka stared at her coldly, his heart hardened by pain. He wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she had ruined his life, but he couldn't find the words. Instead, he muttered under his breath, Good riddance to bad rubbish. He didn't argue or plead for her to stay. In truth, he had already considered packing up and leaving the house himself, unable to bear her presence. Her departure was a relief. As she drove out of the mansion, a part of him wanted to look back, but he resisted. For the first few months, he tried to act as though nothing had happened. He focused on work, pouring himself into the family business to distract from the hole inside him. But it wasn't enough. The mansion felt empty without her presence. But at the same time, he felt like he could finally breathe. Ebuka sent Madame Teresa money occasionally for her upkeep in the village. He avoided visiting her, and he ignored her calls. To him, she no longer existed as his mother. She was a stranger, someone he could never trust again. For the first few months, he tried to act as though nothing had happened. He focused on work, pouring himself into the family business to distract from the gaping hole inside him. But it wasn't enough. The mansion felt empty without her presence. But at the same time, he felt like he could finally breathe. Ebuka sent Madame Teresa money occasionally for her upkeep in the village, but that was the farthest extent their relationship could go. He avoided visiting her, and he ignored her calls. To him, she no longer existed as his mother. She was a stranger, someone he could never trust again. It took him years to even consider forgiving her. But even when he did, the scars of her betrayal ran too deep. The forgiveness wasn't for her, it was for his own peace of mind. Yet he kept her at arm's length, refusing to rebuild any form of connection. What moral lesson did you learn from this story? Please leave it in the comments section below. Please click on the like button, share with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel for more enchanting stories. Thank you, and see you in the next video.